Welcome, everybody. I have a special guest, Derek Fiedler here. He has a wonderful YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out, you should definitely check it out. Derek sort of bumped into me at Symbolic World too, because I bumped into a lot of people there and introduced me to his wonderful friend and had me on his soon to be released, I assume, talk about Symbolic World 2 Summit. And he's a very interesting character, and he agreed to talk about something. And so I thought, given how things work, that we would sort of explore this difference, because we don't quite know what the difference is between the meaning crisis people and the symbolic world people, right? And this is all as part of that idea that there's a Peterson sphere and there's a bunch of stuff. There's like little spheres within the Peterson sphere, spheres of influence, if you will, or spheres of interest. And so that's what I wanted to explore. So Derek, my audience is probably not super familiar with you. So why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll jump in.
Thanks, Mark. It's a lot of fun, man. Glad we get to do this live. Hope everybody enjoys this. Yeah, dude, super cool navigating patterns. I think that's what a lot of us are after. So really glad that you're tackling that and making a space for folks to connect. Yeah, so pleasure to meet you too. Symbolic World 2.0 over in Ohio was a hit, man. Like I really, really appreciated connecting with folks. This year, probably even more so than last time, 2 years when we met, where we, like the speakers were really powerful. It felt like they're good this year, but man, the thing that I'm really appreciating most now, about a month later, is being able to connect with folks like you.
Oh, thanks. So what is the I'll just throw out the word ethos of your YouTube channel?
Of the channel? Yeah, thanks. So I have I host conversations. So the podcast is called Dialogues with Derek, and I've had a lot of Symbolic World contributors, artists, the Peugeot brothers. You mentioned spheres, and I definitely know that one of the overlapping spheres in the Venn diagram with you and I is that we're one of the few people that have interviewed Mathieu Peugeot. And I'm sure similar to your guys' excellent conversation, it was really influential for me and many listeners as well. Those rare moments that we get with Mathieu, and moments like that have really helped inspire me and several others.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that so much as an interview, is more as an exploration. That was more like, because he really boosted my channel. Like he's been a big supporter of the channel all along, and it was more a matter of finding something that we both wanted to discuss and explore, like we do here. So you sort of got familiar with or dragged into or attracted by the symbolic world at some point. Mm-hmm. And like, how did that happen, and what was that like, and was that a path? Like for me, it was Jordan Peterson, and then John Vervaeke, and everybody else after that, right?
Yeah, similar. However, my story begins with Dostoevsky. So I returned back to university in my mid-20s, and I had an older friend, kind of like a mentor figure, that says, you have to read this book before you die. And it was the Brothers Karamazov. Oh. And it has all these legendary stories around it. Like he just sat down this 1,000-page book, right? Absolute masterpiece. And he just penned it straight through. And it's like, you read the book and there's like so many layers and intricacies, and he drops something in page 100 only to fulfill it 800 pages later. And it's like, so it's this legendary thing. Really talked it up. So I read it, and there's a few moments in that book that really, really impacted me. One was the treatise on love by one of the elders and the monks in the book, and I couldn't believe it, man. Like, so there's just so many things in that book that just left me really perplexed and wanting to figure out more. And in that research and follow up after reading that book, I started looking up YouTube videos of like, man, I just want to hear people talking about Dostoevsky. So guess who shows up in the search field?
Can't imagine.
Some skinny Canadian professor that is like very excited to talk about philosophers, really engaged. And of course, it was Dr. Jordan Peterson. and he was talking about the existential philosophers, Nietzsche, and included Dostoevsky. So I watched that, really gained a lot out of it. I was pretty impressed. And then, of course, after that, the ghost of the algorithm and YouTube just like grabbed a hold of that, and all of his controversial videos were happening at that moment too, on campuses and on soon after that, Channel 4. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like kind of like ushered me into that whole phenomenon, that movement that was happening at the time. And of course, it was right when I started listening to him more that the Pepe the Frog video came out, and Jonathan Peugeot's early videos on the Resurrecting the Logos, I think it was called. And that introduced me to Jonathan, and at least, his videos on YouTube. He was posting a lot on breaking down movies and films and other stories, which I've always been a movie guy, especially a sci-fi guy. And so I found those really helpful. And by then, started becoming more involved in the community side of it, because some other followers of Jonathan started a Facebook group, and Symbolic World and the zombie apocalypse or something to that effect. So we started chatting, and then the post got longer and longer, and then Jonathan's like, well, I want to open up this whole other article wing of the website. And so we recruited a few of us, including myself, to begin posting, not just a few paragraphs, but actual articles on the blog. And that early group, many of which you got to meet at the summit, we're still friends. We still collaborate and work together. JP Marceau was the first to be the editor. Now it's Cormac Jones, but David Flores, David Roeder, and so many others that have been contributing and working on, art projects, lots of other projects. And so we, kind of matured into physical media. So one of the cool things at the Symbolic World Summit was this magazine, or the Symbolic World Journal was the final name of it. And so that started with like, well, we keep doing this digital stuff, and there was this collective desire to get into the physical media. It's like, man, we want something that's tangible. We want something that people can hold on to, and it can be, on their shelf or next to the reading chair. And so that began that project, and it just became, it exceeded all of the expectations or ideas that I had. It became really something quite beautiful. And so many years later now, we get to share it with the world.
Interesting. Okay, so there's a number of places I could go there. I mean, at the end here, you're talking more about, and this may not seem like as amusing to you as it will to a bunch of people, but this emerging desire to make things physical from the digital. But that's sort of related to what you were talking about at first, right, with Dostoevsky, which I haven't read any of, by the way. So just, disclaimers.
Well, the advice stands. You got to read them before you're done here.
Oh, well.
Yeah. I wouldn't start with Brothers Karamazov. It sounds like a bit. You're totally welcome to. I was able to get through it, and obviously it made a huge impact on my life. But I would suggest Notes from the Other Ground. And it was a recent discussion. Lots of the feedback from other Dostoevsky readers were, start with Notes from the Underground. It's one of his short works. I mean, maybe 100 pages. And then, go into his novel series that ultimately concludes with the Brothers Karamazov. That was his last work before he died.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. So when you were talking about, you're talking about these connections that get made over time, right? So saying one thing in one part of the story, and then something crops up in the other part of the story. And so part of the thesis that I operate under is that there is a drastic difference between the people who have a crisis of faith and the people that have a meaning crisis. And roughly speaking, the difference is one of what I like to call formation, right? If you weren't formed with, I'll just call it a symbolic understanding, right? We call it the poetic way of informing the world. Then the meaning crisis is probably where you're at. But if you were, like, if you grew up in a church and you were given the fairy stories and things like that, and it could be just one of those. It doesn't have to be all of them, right? Or you were unsupervised play outside, even, I think would do it, right? Any of these things, if you had any of those things, then you're probably more of a crisis of faith candidate. And that's not to say that the crisis of faith people can't like fall down the well, if you will, and turn into meaning crisis people. But I think the tools for helping those people are a bit different. We're all about tools for helping people. We're not really about some of this other, like, I'm not gonna do a journal. It's like, that's not my thing. I'll do movie clubs. We have a movie club tomorrow, actually, on the channel at 10 a.m.
Hey, cool.
Yeah, we're doing Karate Kid. I've got a little document. You fill out the document while you watch the movie, and then we discuss, right? It's like a book club.
So, are you going to have Neil a part of that? You know, he's a part of that world. Did you know that?
I did not. I mean, he watches the channel, so he could have seen the community post.
I'll just say, maybe if it's too late to include him, maybe do a follow-up where you get his take, because the band that he was a part of back in the day was they got a music video going that had to do with the Karate Kid, and then that started snowballing to the point where they had like original cast members, and it's just like all the nostalgia started welling up, and that built some momentum, and it led ultimately to them bringing back the show.
Oh, that was partly his fault, eh?
Yep. Blame Neil. No.
I could totally blame him for that. Yeah. No, I mean, he follows the channel. I made a community page announcement, so we'll see if he shows up. Everybody's pretty much welcome. So, yeah, I mean, I do book clubs. I've done a bunch of book clubs, normally not on my channel, but on other people's channels.
Yeah.
We did language creation, for example. That's very long, right? That's extremely long. And sort of, this is sort of playing out some stuff. All my initial work that I was doing with a bunch of people was on meaning crisis, right? Vervaeke's work, we were taking Vervaeke's framework, we were using those tools. And I think one of the definitions of symbolism that I like to use is that the difference between what we'll say the science people do or the secular people, because those are actually the same thing. Don't tell them, they'll get very upset. They make linear and discrete connections. So this thing is connected to this thing using this mechanism. That's it. Right? Well, in symbolism, it's not. That's not how anything is, right? And the way it is one thing may connect to many things, right? Or there may be many ways to connect out and back in, right?
And then so there's layers that follow that pattern too.
Well, I would argue that's what allows for layers. Because if you make linear and discrete connections, you're stuck in a two-dimensional flat world, like technically, mathematically. Like read the book Flatland, right? It's a very old book, but it's quite good at explaining this. And it's super short. And it's also got pictures, which, for me is a godsend because I have massive dyslexia. So when you start talking about 1,000-page books, I lose all hope for humanity because I can't even imagine. I've done it before. I've read Ayn Rand, so... But also, I don't ever want to do that again. No, I might have to make an exception for Dostoevsky. It sounds like, but we'll see.
That would be, if you were to make an exception, that would be it.
We'll see, Derek. We'll see. So, I think some people when they grow up, they have this ability to connect the world symbolically, or using a poetic way of informing the world, as we would call it, and that makes a big difference in what they need to get out of whatever the meaning crisis manifests as in crisis of faith people, which I would usually classify as something like a loss of faith in the ability of the church or loss of faith in God. One of those two. I think
some type of disillusionment.
Yeah, but a disenfranchisement where you get what John Vervaeke talks about, domicide. That I think is what causes the domicide for the crisis of faith people, right? So,
right, it's because it's not like they're losing faith per se. It's more of like the institution that's housing it or structuring it.
They don't have a justification for a faith that puts them in a place where they have a home.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I can relate to that in some ways too.
Yeah, and so it's not like they don't have the ability to have faith or something. That's not it. It's that they're kind of maybe this is too strong a word, it's just the best I can come up with, rejecting the justification or the lack of need for justification, right? For the faith that would put them in a home. and so that they're unhoming or domiciling themselves effectively. I think that's and that seems to manifest a lot in we'll say in certain types of denominations, right? The fundamentalists, the hardcore fundamentalists get hit first, because of course they would, right? It all makes sense. But the people that have a meaning crisis, they're completely doomed, because they don't. You can't give them a way to understand. I think the science people, unfortunately, are calling it vertical causality, which isn't at all wrong. It's actually the right term. Just I feel like the minute they figure out what it is, they're going to change terms on us and flee to a new word. That's usually what they do. That. Yeah, they just change words, and then they, well, it's not really consciousness; it's metacognition. And stop.
Yeah, totally. So if I could just interject, so I like the domicile, right? You think it's domicile, kind of like that home base. But the meaning crisis, yeah, on that side, it's not that you necessarily are inclined to have a home per se to work through some of those issues. Right, because I just think like you could find your aha moments and your meaning and things that you find meaningful, reading books or especially on the internet, being online. Yeah. But whereas a lot of the crisis of faith folks, the home piece is a huge part of it because of the element of community and how integral that is.
Yeah, they need a church. They know they need a church. And they need a church, right? The meaning crisis people don't think they need a church.
Well, from my background, there's a lot of people that just believe in the invisible church, and you could just do the whole thing by yourself, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, because in a flat world, any group is a community, and any community forms a church, and that is a deep problem. That problem, I've just recently discovered this in the past 2 weeks. I've been listening to this guy's YouTube channel, Ryan Reeves. And if you want to understand history, we'll say I have a bunch of history videos with Adam. He does history much the way I do history. I mean, hours and hours. I haven't finished. The more I learn, right? The language, the rewriting of the Bible in English, the words that guys like Tyndale chose really point to this kind of a problem where you can't tell the difference between a church, a community, a group, and just you and whatever people are around you at the time, which is just like these are all very different things. And I think people lose that sense. And then they look like the meaning crisis people, right? Because the meaning crisis people, and they just don't think they need other people. They actually believe they're individuals, which is, I love to harp on this, and I'm going to forever.
Like the self-discovery. I figured it out.
Right, but there's no such thing as an individual. It's an impossible condition. And so you get into this self-discovery, self-help, emergence, self-emergence. It's all based on you out to the world. And that doesn't work. And then they find Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson is somehow able to, or John Vervaeke, but Peterson more likely, it's somehow able to show you the flaw in that and then point you. I mean, I always point to one when he talks in Maps of Meaning lectures about Pinocchio. And he basically starts the Pinocchio lecture with, why do you even understand this? And even if you did understand any of it, why would you be attracted to any? Like, how can you possibly relate to any of this? We're talking about a cartoon, a wooden boy, a talking cricket, on and on and on, right? And he's like, how do you make sense of this at all? And it's like, the materialists are like, wait a minute, that's a really good question. What the hell is going on? Right. And I think that things like that, it's more than just that, but things like that allow Peterson to break people out and get them to start to consider the things. So my argument would be, John Vervaeke talks about combinatorial explosion. Yes, if you take an emergence first, or emergence, we call it emergence is good, attitude towards the world, and you start measuring things and calculating things, you end up with mathematical equations that can't be solved because there's just too many variables involved, or too many numbers involved. Peterson points at that too, but Vervaeke does a more scientific job of it, right? The thing that collapses that, though, is called symbolism. Like that I would say that would be the technical word for the solution to combinatorial explosion is called symbolism, where you only have so many things, even though they have multiple connections, they're still constraining those connections. So the connections reduce over time. They never get to 0 or to 1, or probably to 2. Yeah, they never get below 3, but they reduce the connections, and that reduces the option space that Vervaeke's so afraid of, which he should be. Like that's like
right, because when you go from 2 to 3, it goes from a flat line to a triangle, right? Yeah, vertical.
Exactly.
The first step into verticality.
Yeah, it's kind of worse, right? Like the flat line idea, the 1 and the 2, those are temporary illusions, because that's where the nihilism comes from. Because you either hit the limit of that, it doesn't explain everything, and then you've got the God of the gaps problem going on, or you embrace it fully and you go, I am unified with the universe, and you vanish into it, and that's nihilism too. Like it doesn't, you'll get your nihilism one way or the other, right? And so you can't live there. That's the problem. I mean, unfortunately, you can survive there a lot longer than you should be able to because of the quote modern world, right? And that I think is where the issue is. And so I think for people that maybe because they're online in particular, symbolism's really hard online, right? Like it's not even symbolism. It's like anything that's not two-dimensional is really hard online. Being sarcastic is impossible in text. And so you have to simulate it, right? I used to simulate it with smiley faces.
Yeah, it's like the lowest resolution of being able to accomplish sarcasm.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's technically impossible, but people come up with conventions because we're people and we're constantly coming up with conventions for things, which is good.
Do you mean emojis, memes?
Emojis and memes.
Those are imagistic, right? They're not text.
Right. Well, like I said, I use smiley faces for sarcasm back in the day. That's when I was primarily, it was way before the web. When I was primarily, typing things out, there'd be a sentence with a with the smiley face at the end, not a graphic one. We used the keyboard like real men. And that would
LOL really saved us, right? It was becoming more online text.
LOL saved us. Yeah. And
it's like that was
other
really kept us going.
Of expression. Yeah. Well, mixing caps and lowercase letters in odd ways, right? That aren't grammatically accurate or something, right? Who cares about Strunk and White? We're gonna just shake all that out because in the digital typesetting world, you don't have a lot to work with unless you go with a complicated actually programming language. Technically, you can't do it with ASCII. You can't do it with regular text, right? And so until emojis come along, which is a long time in coming, and then you're constrained by the emojis you got, and those emojis aren't always a straight line to what you're trying to say. So the miscommunication happens immediately, right?
Yeah, interesting how. Like the first page of emojis and the first ones we go to are faces.
Yeah,
right.
They're all faces.
Like they're human faces. It's like we're trying the thing that we want most, right? Beyond that text level is countenance. We want to see the human face.
Exactly. Well, it's funny to me too, because people are always like, well, I don't understand why personification and why it has to be a person and I'm like, okay, but if you're data oriented, you seriously didn't notice what Derek just pointed out. Like, guys, the first thing we invent are faces. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. It's just the first thing that happens. There's got to be a there because it's always the first thing.
So well, it's it's the image, but so I don't know. Have you seen the projects that the lengths that people have gone to try to tell stories via emojis, like just emojis?
I haven't delved into it recently. I've seen some of these efforts in the past, and I'm just like ancient Egypt was a thing, guys. But sure.
Yeah. It kind of has that hieroglyphic type of feel, but it's someone did Moby Dick. The whole story of Moby Dick was in emojis.
What? Yeah. No.
Yeah. So it's been a while since I checked in on that work or those type of projects, but they pulled it off. But like you have to have some type of pre-reference, right? Leading into it, like these prerequisites to where the story of Moby Dick, and then you're kind of like you have the end in mind, and so you're trying to like figure out the means of getting there with these images. So I don't know if you could tell a brand new story with just like a brand new fiction, for example,
No,
I,
that's
I, I don't think
Darmok
that's
and
possible.
Jalad at whatever there. Yeah, that's the Star Trek Next Gen episode.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, Mark, I had a thought on what you're
sure.
talking about with science and symbolism and meaning
Mm,
and community. Yeah, so what I've seen so far is maybe we'll start with symbolism. So with symbolism, what I picked up is that it is like an area of study. Like for example, you can go into an English class, and any decent English class worth its salt will have a day where you talk about symbolism,
mhm, mhm.
where it is a feature of literature, where you can
Right.
um, have an apple and it has condensed. There's a lot of meaning packed into it. It could be symbolic of what's happening in the plot of the story or the characters, or those references, multi-layered references to Genesis or to agriculture. It's like it's just in one thing. It's just in one apple, right? So there's that. It's kind of like the study of literature. But then if you really look at it in a bigger way, you kind of look at what, say, like the Peugeot brothers are doing, or as I like to say, the brothers Peugeot, obviously influenced by the brothers Karamazov.
Yeah.
But it's at this point it's canon, just to set the record straight. The brothers Peugeot. So what they've done is it's definitely more than just like, hey, there's a symbol and it's more metaphorical. This is what it means, like the first description I had. But then all of a sudden they're like, okay, well, it's not just this. And to talk about science a little bit, it's not just this like linear material atoms. This is all what we have, causality. It's like, guess what, guys? With symbolism, that's just the half of it.
Right, right,
There's
right.
a material half, right? The embodied path, and then there's also the patterns and the meaning, the mathematics, like all of these unseen forms that without which all of this material stuff would just be a bunch of watery goo, right? It'd
Exactly.
be formless and meaningless. So you have to have both, and one you can't see. So what are we going to
Mhm.
do about that? It doesn't have atoms in its own right. It's this uh, organizing structure that's within all of the structures and things that we see and interact with.
Right.
So then
Yep.
you look at that level where it's like, okay, well, symbolism in that sense just opens up a whole lot more, and it's a whole lot more holistic in its ability to describe our world and really the cosmos itself. And then the cool thing is, like, you see those patterns, and that introduces the layers. You can see, the patterns of, the things in my room, or maybe the 2.5 acres that I live on in Northern California, to like the cosmos itself, right? How the
Mhm,
planets
mhm.
are orientated and how they move. And you can see these circular concentric patterns, very similar to like me, my family, my home, my
Right.
neighbors around me in this valley, to the whole Clear Lake Basin that I live in, to the state. You can just see these concentric circles. So all of a sudden, symbolism is introducing all of that, and it's just taking it to a whole nother degree. It's like science has, like, say, a number 42, and then in my experience, symbolism comes and it puts like to the power of 3, right? All of a sudden,
Yeah, yeah.
it
Exactly.
just expands everything, and it becomes this whole other area that you can explore. And then you're engaging with beauty and meaning, and then you're finding patterns of truth, and then that has a way of affecting how you live and the goodness of how you're acting and what you're
Right.
doing in the world. Um, but then, just my final thought on that too is symbolism is more than just like this. Wow, there's so much to look at, whole picture of things. It's also a community. You look more specifically, like in the first example we had with the Symbolic World Summit and what Jonathan has really built out, with several of the people that we mentioned, that's, his contributors, or people even behind the scenes that are running the summit and running the website and helping with the videos and the forums and the Discord and the circle community that he has on his website. So you look at that and, man, like, there's friendships, there's something that is very obviously holding us together. And again, it's this unseen thing, right? It's meaning, but it's a
Right.
topic of symbolism in this
Yep.
grander sense. But it's also, you and I connecting, and it's also like a community of people that we can go to have discussions, or even now, like the friendships have matured to where it's like we're talking about family. We're like
Mm.
kind of like bonding at more of that intimate level, way beyond just a discussion topic about art or philosophy or science.
Yeah. No, well said. Yeah, I think all that's true. I think that the reason why the secular people, the science people get screwed up is because they want an object to be immutable, right? They want like, oh, a chair is always like this or something, right? And then it's not. The thing about symbolism is you can change the object of the symbol, right? And have the same quote functionality, but it's also not arbitrary. Like you can't just swap it out for anything. And that I think is where they get
Mm,
messed up. They think
yeah.
either this is immutable or it doesn't matter. And it's like, oh no. That's both of those are untrue. And the reason why I would say is because, to your point, the symbol is the gateway from the material into the ethereal for our minds. And I
Hmm.
think the reason why people get tripped up on that is because, John Vervaeke does a wonderful job of talking about the imaginal realm, which is like, yes,
Yeah.
please talk about this as a scientist. It's super
Yeah.
important. Also, you can't do anything like science or math on that. Like you can't understand
Mm.
that using those tools. Logic, reason, rationality, mathematics, all out the window.
Yeah.
We're
You have to
not
go to the
right.
realm of story to figure out what's important, what even to study.
Exactly. So, but that you can enter without a symbol because you're the symbol that gets you into your own imaginal. The problem is it's
Hmm.
your imaginal realm and it's not anyone else's, right? And so I can say red dragon, Derek, and you get an image in your head and I have an image in
Hmm.
my head,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
tell you one thing about those images. They're not the same, right? And I can tell you another thing about those images. They're exactly the same at the same time. We both know what a red dragon is, right? The connections that we make to red dragon are going to be completely different, right? Potentially, they're
Yeah.
almost certainly not going to be the same, but most of the most important ones will overlap, and that's the
Hmm.
really important part.
That's where it gets really interesting. Yeah, where you go into the imaginal realm and all of a sudden see consistencies, you know,
Right, right.
and you don't
But
even have to
that's
be within proximity, you know, be on another
that's what
continent
allows
or even
community.
another time.
Yeah, but that's what allows for community. That's what allows for us to cooperate. We can't
Hmm.
cooperate in the material realm because, quite it's going to seem trivial. It's not trivial. We can't occupy the same space at the same time, and so there's always a conflict. It's always an opposition. There's
Hmm.
always a problem. And the place where we take what would be a conflict in the material realm, like, so you've written articles and had an editor. I wrote my little book here and I had an editor, and it's a fight, right? Like it's not a mean fight, right?
Hmm.
The winners are everybody, right?
Hmm.
Everybody involved. Although sometimes people get a little too hurt and then they can't cooperate anymore. But it's a fight. There's a conflict there. Your editor wants you
Hmm.
to change something, and
Right. Wants
that's
to
a
kill your
conflict
darlings, as they say.
in some cases, right? But sometimes it's a banal conflict, and we don't think of it as a conflict. It's like, well, I wrote something and I wrote it wrong because in the moment I was being a muppet, right? And because
Yeah.
that happens, like you're not perfect. It turns out. I don't. Maybe people don't know this. You're not perfect, and then your editor points that out to you. That's still a conflict. It's not a
Hmm.
negative. The conflict doesn't have to be negative. It's not a
Right.
negative conflict, right? But it's still a conflict. And then the way you resolve that is, maybe he suggests something, or maybe he just tells you got to rewrite the whole thing, and you can do
Hmm.
it on your own, or right. And that's all about the quality of the relationship and how the relationship works best between you and your editor,
Yeah.
right?
There's usually
Going
breakthrough on the other side, leads to the next aha moment where it's like, oh, I see how it all sinks together now. But if it
right.
wasn't for that conflict, you wouldn't have been pushed to see it that way.
Exactly. And in some cases, for my book, my editor just went and changed a damn word, or rewrote a sentence. Just didn't even ask me, right? Just did, right, because we knew what
Right.
we were doing.
There's that side where it's not enough conflict. It's like, no, challenge the dang thing.
Well,
Want it to be stalwart, want it to be worth its salt.
advantage of the internet, Google Docs, pretty cool because you can see the changes, right? And they're tagged. So
Yeah.
I could go in and reverse them if needed, right? But in other cases, it was, I don't understand this paragraph. And in other cases, it was, I don't understand why this paragraph is here, and I don't understand what's in it. And I'm like, oh no, I really screwed that up.
Oh yeah.
That happens, right? That happened. At least it happened to me when I was writing my
Mm.
book. So that engagement is important, but it's not negative. It doesn't have to be negative. If you only have the material, if you don't have the symbolic, it has to be negative. It has to be negative because you don't have the tools to do the combination, right? That's the combinatorial explosion, right? We're trying to combine things, but it's explosive. Yeah, you try to combine things, you blow them up. Good job, science, right? But in symbolism, you just see the proper combinations of things, and that's not perfect or anything, but it's only through a good story that we know that not only that there's a wolf and that the wolf can eat us, but we can have a chance of identifying the wolf, right? Mm-hmm. It's three things. It's like, it's not one thing, it's not two, it's three things. First, you have to know there are wolves, then you have to know how dangerous they are, and then you have to know how to identify them. And sure, 1 is an improvement over 0, and 2 is an improvement over 1, but you really kind of need 3. Otherwise, 1 and 2 are of much less utility to you than you might think, right? And that's sort of the thing that symbolism gives you, is that once you sort of understand the goodness of a story about a wolf eating somebody and how that operates, it's just a huge upgrade to your life. I mean, you can kind of understand what's going on around you a lot better than, well, this country attacked that country, and therefore it must be this one thing. It's like, it's never in the history of conflict been the case, right?
One distinction that's interesting about symbolism, as you just described it, is, I would agree, but then there's an interesting thing that the brothers Peugeot present, is that, like, maybe you could call it more like cosmic symbolism, like you alluded to it before, where like humans are the ultimate symbol on the earth, in the world. And you can look at it as like, well, for example, like the words on the screen or the words on the page, you can say, oh, well, hey, that's a text. It's not an apple. It's not a, image or symbol. But then if you read like Language of Creation by Mathieu, it's like, no, actually words are a perfect example of symbolism. That's his first couple of chapters. He's just talking about letters and words and how they form sentences and paragraphs. And what he's saying is, like, if you look at it, even actually, it's funny, we're talking about my articles. This is the very first one that I published. One of the earliest articles was on the symbolism of story, and it kind of breaks some of this down. One of the sci-fi articles I wrote on the story of Arrival touches on this too, where it's like, you have meaning, right? And you just have like a jar of ink. Like, I'm a really big fountain pen guy. I have like a jar of just sloshy ink, right? You can't read it. It's just a bunch of sloshy ink, black goo. But then you combine that with, meaning that's at this point unseen. It's in my imaginal realm. And then it flows through me through like, a pen or an object. And all of a sudden that sloshy goo takes form. And now it's a recognizable symbol, right? Because it's the coming together of heaven and earth. And now we can recognize it as meaning, and even shared meaning. So really, like, text itself, you see what I mean? Like, there's a way of talking about symbolism, especially in the Peugeotian sense, that is pretty encompassing. It's like, it's important to have these like kind of distinctions of what we're talking about with science and symbolism and meaning. But then kind of like in the background, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm like, well, the way that the brothers Peugeot really presented it, other thinkers like went on and stuff, but like you could draw this huge circle around all of that and still call it symbolism.
Yeah, I like that. That actually gave me a bit of an insight, I think. So I thank you for that. This is exactly why I do this. It's nice to see it happen live, I guess. It sort of occurred to me that part of this battle, I mean, I have several framings for what's going on, post myth of World War II or something, and how that all came to be, which is much more wrapped up in a longer time frame. But maybe another frame to see this in is there's a battle for the ownership over text. See, and now we're firmly into the postmodern, which I think was pointed out at the summit, is older than the postmodern thinkers. The postmodern problem, which is, if you think of it as a battle over ownership for text, that actually works. Yeah, that actually works completely. There's no flaws in that I can figure. There's a battle over text. Is text just what the scientists say it is, which again is a linear and discrete. This word means this thing, which is not, words don't have meaning. They have definitions. Right? The scientists fail right at the beginning. Right? But that's what they want. That's the world they want. That's the world they're comfortable with. That's the world that, and a lot of them are fundamentalists, or were fundamentalists, we'll say religiously, but even if not, they become fundamentalist in a scientific sense. And
right, the scientism.
They start to do scientism. You read my mind. They start to do the scientism thing. Same thing. It's all fundamentalism. It's the same pattern, right? From my perspective, I just see the same thing with different phrasing. So maybe that's the battle. The battle is that the brothers Peugeot, they are trying to re-enchant text for people, right? And that makes Jonathan's position at the summit, which I thoroughly disagree with, a lot more palatable. And then they're trying to re-enchant that text, trying to open it back up. Right. And that's the key, because the scientists are sort of closing text into this unsymbolic or flat world version of everything. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to do a whole video on that. That's great. Thanks. That's good. You get a whole video for me. Thanks, Derek.
Hey, that's what we're here for. So you had mentioned something that you disagree with Jonathan about. Can you describe that? What's going on there?
Well, I talked with Neil about this. There seems to be something going on with him. I think there's a bunch of little things. I think I need to put them all together. So if you could bear with me, I will be answering your question, even though it may seem like I'm not. So human beings have sort of this idea that what they want to do is redeem is probably the closest word. Redeem certain types of things. And so I'm French Canadian. Monsieur Peugeot is French Canadian, right? There, the Peugeots are French Canadian, and there's different factions within French Canada.
I forgive them for that too. Just so it's clear.
There's no need to forgive God's chosen people, Barry. No need. But within that, there's different factions. So French is his first language. My family, even my family up in Biddeford, Maine, which is where we came to Lowell from, they all spoke French for sure, or French Canadian. I don't want to piss off any French people because they get very angry if you equate those two things.
The distinction.
And this is, but also they didn't like them. Like my family's like, screw the French. Like actually, they were not happy about.
Wow.
Well, you get to think about
our favorite pastime.
I mean, I know, but I say this all the time, and I'm not actually all that kidding. Like, and I'm fairly sure I'm not positive. I'm fairly sure we're from the south of France. We left the south of France. Why would anybody leave the south of? What did they offer you? What kind of an offer do you have to make somebody to leave the south of France? Things must have been pretty bad there, Derek. Had to be pretty bad. Because we went to freaking Canada. Have you been to Canada? Canada's not a livable part of the planet, Derek. Not at all. You can't live in Canada. You can struggle and suffer and die in Canada, but you can't live. Their weather's terrible. It's all. There's a few places where for a little bit of the year it's almost functional. But come on, man. And you're telling me you're going to leave south of France for that? There's no chance. To do what? To go be in the woods with no women? As a Frenchman? What is happening? Seriously. And then there's a further thing to that, which is like my grandfather, he did not want his kids learning any French, actually.
Oh.
Because he was proud American. Now he would belt out in French, the Canadian anthem and stuff. Like he was proud of his heritage, but he also wanted us to be American. And I think there's a bunch of people, maybe in Montreal, maybe in Quebec. I haven't been to Quebec yet. I got to go up there. I really do. Who long for the motherland, right? And I'm like, not in that camp. I'm never in that camp. I see France as a complete disaster upon the world. We just signed another treaty in Versailles. I don't think we're learning any lessons here. Every treaty signed in Versailles to me seems to cause a bigger problem than it solved. Anyway, So I think there's an element of that in there. And I think that if you fall in love with something that you consider your family, and postmodernism is very French, unfortunately, you also want to save your family, right? You want to save like the people that formed you, and postmodernism, I think, formed Jonathan, right? And so I think there's that element of redemption in him for the ideas of postmodernism. Now, on this channel, I just flat out say there's no good in postmodernism. It's actually pure evil. It's completely unredeemable, irredeemable by anybody or any force that I'm aware of. Like, let me just put it that right. Now, God can do what he wants. I get that. But also, that doesn't mean he will, and it doesn't mean that it's any of our business if he does or not, right? And so this is not our fight. We should not be trying to do this. We should say, listen, all these guys were horrible human beings trying to cover up horrible human being crimes. And that's why they came up with this reprehensible philosophy. And I want nothing to do with any of this nonsense. Now, that's just my opinion, right? It doesn't come only from me, and I ain't the only one that thinks that way, my friend. Not even close, right?
Now, would you be willing to say that, but also say like, well, maybe we could pick out the bones, right, and leave this discards over there?
No, there aren't any. I mean, people keep saying this, and see, this is one of the problems I have, right? So I grew up around Boston. I used to audit classes at Harvard and MIT because I could, even though I didn't go to those schools and never went to any college university thing at all, right? But I did audit classes occasionally, and I was exposed to those people. And I talked to those people back in the 90s about this. All kinds of them. I've talked to literally hundreds of people about this postmodern thing in particular, but other things. They don't have any answers for what's good in post. No one does. And I think to be totally fair, I think Jonathan sort of came to that at the end of the summit in his last talk, which I still insist was the best talk. As in terms of consistency and the topic and everything. I really thought he nailed it. I don't know why he doesn't like his own talk, but I thought it was wonderful. Right at the end, he said, well, maybe this isn't something that the postmoderns intended. And I'm like, that is correct. They did not intend the goodness that you're seeing in postmodernism. It's a side effect. And therefore, it's not part of postmodernism. And therefore, we don't have to redeem the postmoderns or postmodernism to get it, because it's actually completely outside of postmodernism. It's part of the world, the pre-created order that we have, that just, you do this, this happens. That's true, right? And so
it would be like the unintended, to postmodernists, would be like the unintended monster on the fringes that just keeps growing and growing.
Well, no, I would call it the unintended order that springs from the abject chaos that they propose, right? Because I mean, this came out really strongly in Heather Pollington's talk, which I have to go over again, possibly 3 or 4 more times, right? Because it was very much out of my depth with art in particular, right? She sort of hinted at this, like, oh, you know, anybody can interpret your painting any way they want. Well, how symbolic is that? Now, the fact that there are a limited number of, let's call them valid symbolic ways to interpret, it's kind of sloppy, but that's the best I can do. A painting means that there'll be, you know, a bunch of groups of people, right? But I don't think that's good. I think what's good is that, you know, people basically settle into maybe 3 categories for how to interpret the painting, and not, you know, 100 or 3,000 or whatever. It's a ridiculous number, right? I mean, because once the number's too high, once you can reinterpret the artist's work, that's the same as killing the author. Like, the artist might as well not be there. Any idiot can hang a banana on a wall with a piece of tape, after all, right? Or a nail or whatever else they want, right? And then every time you hang the banana differently, you have n number of different interpretations of that too. And again, the fact that they'll collapse, and some people will ignore the hanging type and say, no, it's the same as this other, you know, art exhibit or nonsense you want to call it. That's neither here nor there. That's just called, yeah, we have a limited range of our thoughts, you know, even in a large group. So, you know, that just collapses. I don't understand as an artist why you would want anything like that, because you lose control of your art entirely immediately. But that's not even the problem. The problem is now you have a flood of bad artists. That is the problem of modern art. The problem of modern art is not any of these other things. It's that You have a bunch of incompetent morons trying to do something that they're not good at. And, I mean, I saw that in the computer industry. We gave everybody a way to program. And, I mean, AI slop code is the same thing. Now, actually, anyone can program by just talking to your computer. Do we have I had one day where every single electronic device that I use that has so much as, 100 transistors in it actually broke. It didn't break permanently, but like they all exhibited bugs. I practically lost my mind. I was like, first of all, I know how to fix all of this. Like anything that's broken in any of these devices, I guarantee you I could fix the software in no time flat. So this really pisses me off because I don't have access. So I can't implement it. I just have the skills to do it, right? Different problems. So you get this flood and then everything collapses. And I think that's what people are seeing, right? They're not seeing some avant-garde new way of seeing the world. They're seeing some half-wit moron who really wants to be an artist but can't be because they don't have a compulsion. So like my artist here who did this artwork in the book, she's got a compulsion, right? She has to draw, has to. There's no option for her. She can't not draw because that's not a thing, right? Like, look at these drawings, right? All inspired, nautically, obviously. She can't not draw. So she's like, and she's.
I like the pun there. I don't know if you intended that.
No.
She can't not draw knots.
Not draw knots. Yes. So not normally not, but that was the thing. She put in a lot of work to do that because she hasn't seen knots. Or those types of knots, nautical knots, because she doesn't live near the ocean. Had never seen them. Had never seen a cleat. Had to figure out how to draw that. Took a very long time. Put in a lot of work, and then came up with these beautiful. I mean, they're pretty good. I mean, they're like as good as anyone else's nautical knot drawings. I'll tell you though, Derek. Don't tell her I said this. They were terrible in the beginning. Well, you can tell her, she knows. They weren't good in the beginning, right? But she knew it. That's an artist. That's somebody who's going to put in the time, the work, the effort. They're not going to walk into a gallery, right? Tape a banana to the wall and go home. They're not going to do that, right? It's never going to happen, right? And so that's the fundamental difference. Who's going to put in the work? Are they going to? And it's not even the work, really, right? You have to care. You have to care about what you're doing, right? And because maybe a way to think about this idea is symbolism is inflated, or the space that opens up symbolism it can only be filled with care, right? So you have to care about the quote object, right, in order for the symbol to kind of come alive or exist or something. I mean, we're in tough territory propositionally, right? And then that further enables the space of the symbol to be available to be filled at the same time.
Yeah, care in the sense of like, this matters to me, I'm going to pay attention to it. That type of care.
Yeah, and not necessarily the object, right? So maybe the vase symbolizes something to you, and I'm going to care about it. But maybe the vase contains the ashes of a loved one, right? And so what you're caring for is not the vase; it's the memory of the loved one. It's not the ashes in the vase either, right? It's the memory of the loved one. That's what opens up the space for that particular symbol. And then maybe that symbol is only available to you in a limited fashion because you didn't know the person, and that's fine. Like, I have no problem with that. But it's the caring that opens up the space, right? Because to everybody else that looks at the vase, they just go, "Oh, it's just a vase or an urn or whatever," right? They don't. It doesn't do anything for them because there's no space opened up for them because they don't care about it, or they don't care about what's on the other side of it, if you will. If that's a valid way to. It's really hard to talk about symbols.
Another thing I wanted to mention about the community aspect, what we're saying. With science and meaning and symbolism and symbolic world as a community is that it's not a primary community in the sense that there aren't rituals. It's not something that you can center your whole life around.
Right.
I think it's an important important subjects, an important community. It's been absolutely influential in my life, how I see the world, are that I share with the world. But what it typically does, and what we see, is that it has a segue into church community, or really, it's kind of saying the same word twice. It leads people to church, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean that broadly. Although, man, the summit that we just went to, Symbolic World 2.0, there was, you probably noticed it too, but there was much more predominance of Eastern Orthodox church integrated into the happenings and the festivities.
Yes.
If I, not saying good, bad, or the other, I'm just saying from 2 years ago to last month, May of 2026, there's just much more involvement into the itinerary, the people involved, the attendees. But we've seen that a lot. And Jonathan's an Eastern Orthodox guy, and many of the contributors and people that are involved in the Symbolic World community are. So it's not a surprise. But my point is that something is centralizing, like your family, your life, your activities, so much of the symbolic world, it can influence us and how we interact with things, but like it's not centralized to, like, say my whole family. Right? It's only like, like we read the Little Red Riding Hood together, and the books that are created. Maybe read your book or Jonathan's books, mine or the others. But like my uncle, I don't know if he has any clue about symbolism. So it's like it's not a primary community, in that it's not centralized into our whole lives. And it typically overlaps significantly with the church, or I speak from my life, like that faith sphere that you're introduced. So there's lots of overlap with that. Like, it really reinvigorated my way of reading the Bible. About that time where it was kind of like, okay, well, I've read the book a couple times, and we do Bible study and stuff, and all of a sudden it was like someone shone like an ultraviolet light called Symbolism on it, and it was like, oh my gosh, you can see all these patterns, and everything's just illuminated from just coming out of the text. It's like, I had no idea there's so many hyper connections, and you can see this here and that over there, and the whole thing ties with this whole other picture in the beginning. So that was hugely influential, but it was like, it's not going to replace sacred scriptures.
No, it's not. It's not supposed to. I mean, so we found something very, very similar. So this is what I was hoping I would find, actually. So my suspicions are confirmed. Thank you, Derek, doing yeoman's work here today, at least from my perspective. So one of the things that happened on the Awakening from Meaning Crisis Discord was, so John Vervaeke started this meditation series, and then a guy who already had the Discord came on and said, hey, join the Discord. And so I jumped on the Discord and sort of moved the community, more on the Discord platform rather than the YouTube platform, which was dependent upon John. Right now, we're not dependent upon John anymore. Now we can build a community, and community is something I just kind of naturally do. You can read about that in my book. The link to the store is below, of course. So that upgrade to community, because the meaning crisis is so flat, they don't know, like, a group of random people they met yesterday, to them is a group, even though it's just like the people that are around you. Right? And they think a group, a bunch of random people, and a community are all the same thing, and it might as well be church at that point, because it's flat, right? There's no verticality to it whatsoever. And so if you want to think about this in terms of inflation, and you can substitute the word enchantment there, by the way, and that'll work fine for the people who like to use the fancy word, which I use all the time, but also I want to just demonstrate it as flat as possible. So one of the things that happened is we have this series of practices based on John's meditation series, right? And it's sort of stepped, right? You learn these, and then once you have that down, you learn this next, right? It's very video game-ish at some level. And that was very good for people. A lot of people got a lot of help out of it. Well, he expanded some of that. And then he had one particular practice, which we actually turned into a group practice. We now call it exploring narrative meaning. And the way it works is, you kind of attend a couple sessions as a viewer, and the viewers are allowed to participate at the end. But what they're doing is they're watching somebody read first a piece of prose, just a snippet, right? And then they're led through a process, and then they read a piece of poetry and led through a process, and then they're led through that process a third time to combine the two, right? To see if that's possible, basically. And then people are allowed to, at the end, ask questions and things like that. I think we had it down to an hour and a half, which is as quick as we could possibly do such a crazy practice. The thing about that particular practice was for people who got, we'll say, all the way through it, who became readers and were able to read, they all went to church. All of them. A small sample, I get it. Also, based on a very accurate and precise model that we upgraded John's model to our model, basically. And the way I can describe to you, we'll say in scientific terms, how it works. That would be a very long video, but so I won't do it here. But I suspected the same thing was happening on the crisis of faith side, with people just engaging with Jonathan's work. But I don't think anybody from the Vervaeke camp is ever going to go to a Symbolic World. Like, it's not that they will never listen to, any of the Brothers Peugeot work or anything like that. Some of them will certainly engage with it, but it won't resonate enough with them for them to get involved. Right. And since I was, in essence, I was a meaning crisis person, but that was when I was young and homeless. And the fact that I survived means I fixed the meaning crisis. So I look at this and I go, how is anybody a meaning crisis? It's easy to fix. It takes 2 seconds, right? So I know how to fix this. This is not that hard. So that was what I was looking for. Is there a parallel between those two worlds? You've kind of confirmed it for me. It's not that I didn't have hints and haven't been, closely eyeing you Symbolic World people for that pattern, because I have, and yeah, so you've just pretty much confirmed my suspicion is that when you get these upgrades, if you want to think of them that way, they lead you up. They're upgrades. They're not downgrades. Some things are downgrades. It's like we got a downgrade today, like Pornhub. Downgrade the internet. Let's downgrade the internet. Let's invent Pornhub. Great. Thanks. I wanted an upgrade, though, not a downgrade.
Yeah, and I think if I were to apply what you're saying personally, based on what we shared before, so like I had a mini meaning crisis where I was like, I read a book by Dostoevsky and was like, I have to find deeper meaning in this. I have to figure out what's going on with the writer, what's going on with the story. And so it's like very much like this little, it's one book, one author, But then that scales up and it's like, okay, well now like UC Davis at the time had a bunch of scandals happening, it was about 8 years ago where there was a protest that turned violent, and the dean at the time said it was like, this is the dark spot in the college's history. It was like when Ben Shapiro, Milo Yiannopoulos came, and people that didn't really care for them hurt other people. So, there was a lot of that stuff happening too. That also, like a bigger circle after that would be, the department that I was studying in, community development, at that point was hijacked with its ideas. So its ideology was very much taken over by the Marx and postmodern, just exactly what Peterson's describing. So, as I was going in pre-Peterson, I was like, what in the world's going on? And parts of it were relatable and attractive, and you kind of feel the pull, very strong gravitational pull, especially for young people. And I was a returning student. So I had owned businesses, did traveling, did international traveling, lived in multiple cities, and then came back to university. And even that of being like, a little bit more of a mature adult than like an 18-year-old just entering in. Even then, the gravitational pull was very subtle, and all of a sudden you wake up, you're like, whoa, I'm over here now. These things are making sense. And so that was a little mini crisis in that, right, where I was like, okay, well, this is challenging my world, my view, my way of living. How do I make sense of it? And that's why figures like Peterson were absolutely instrumental, because it was every day. I'd go to multiple lectures. I was reading all of the postmodern books. how to be a good Marxist at the local level, how to be, and basically they were training people to be activists and not
Yep.
elaborating. Maybe I could show the receipts and share some of the textbooks and the articles they expected us to read and think about for hours on end, and the lecture series of what to talk about. But so it was instrumental, like not solving that, but like, navigating. I was very blessed that I had some guides like Peterson to be able to navigate through all of that and come out the other side with a sense of wholeness and direction and purpose, be able to distinguish, be able to read the map of what's going on. And then that leads, into bigger circles, what's happening with the greater world, or what's happening with symbolism, what's happening with my family and community, and then the church. And so you can see it's like, you can have one little example of a book and author, but then these things compound, and then ultimately it leads to a centralizing community. We've talked about church, but I'm sure others could share ones where it's not just one little circle, but it's a thing that overlaps with all of those, small and medium circles.
Yeah, it's the frame that ties all the other frames together. That
or
grand
for
narrative,
me, like the through line, be a good one too.
the through line, right? That grand
Although I do
narrative.
look at the vertical, the pillar, the axis of meaning. And the through line is slightly different, but I do think
you could look at it that way.
something.
Peterson's got the golden thread. That's his.
Yeah.
But that's what they're trying to destroy. And I think this is where everyone, also, I think they're really not accounting for how bad the destruction of hierarchy is, because it's really just the destruction of hierarchy. Because then that's the loss of the vertical causality and destruction of hierarchy. For me, you're just saying the same thing. Like, you destroyed the hierarchy and now you're trying to get it back, and you don't know how, because you can't build it from below. Not to say that it can't. Not to say that it doesn't need work from below to be built, but you can't build it from below. You and your 40 smartest friends also can't do that. Right? It really needs a binding principle above to emanate down, to create the thing that can take these different communities and combine them with that thread. Right? In other words, there has to be a hand sewing or pushing that needle and thread through the communities, through the frames, through the through the families, right? To bind them together in a cohesive way, and that's the emanation, right? But it's always going to be a hand running the needle that pulls the thread. There's still going to be three things, and you have to count for all three of them. You can't keep reducing.
It's definitely a very good Lewis type move. I know he described it as the laws of nature. Everybody's talking about the laws of nature. He's like, well, who's the legislature?
Yeah.
Who's the one making the laws?
Well, that's because the scientists got spooked, right? So there used to be a technical term for that. The natural and the supernatural. And what word do we just associate poorly now? Supernatural. But that's actually the technically scientifically correct term for all the things that science can't deal with. And I think that's the problem. The material world's great, and you sort of indicated earlier that material world is like half, and I'm like, not only do I not think it's half, but I don't think any of the important things are available in the material world. It's like, even if it were half, that wouldn't help you, because all the important stuff is actually in what I call the ethereal world, and that's because that's the scientifically accurate and precise word for that. You don't want supernatural. All right, well, we'll do material and ethereal then. How's that? I can play this game.
I think a lot of those struggles definitely come from what we inherited with the either or mentality. Like, I mean, that's so ingrained. So I think coming at it from a holistic of like symbolically, there is that learning curve. There is like that learning the language that takes a few years. I learned a good bit of Spanish and traveling and living in Latin America. But it took a lot of effort, took years. And so what we're talking about has the learning curve, simply because we inherited, English, let's say. And you know what? It has a very different way of approaching conveying meaning back and forth than Spanish or Romantic language. It's the same thing with a holistic, it's like it could be both and, or you need both. You know, you need to have the physical with the patterns. You have to have embodied patterns,
Yeah.
right? So you have to have the spirit, you have to have the breath, but you also have the blood and the bones too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think actually it's slightly worse than that. The conversation I'd like to get into at some point, you know, we definitely won't be able to do that today, is what do we do with the people who can't think outside of the binary? Like a lot of people can't. It's not even that they
Oh
can't
yeah.
think about more than two things at once. That's also true, sadly enough. And I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of people like that. But what do we do with the people who they think about one thing as a concrete thing and the other thing as not that, which is a big
Mm,
problem because you're like, it's a very, very low resolution picture of the world, as
yeah.
Peterson would say. And what do we do about those people? Because I think one of the main problems is that there are an awful lot of people who think that what I'm outlining would be horrific and can't be correct. And I'm
Mm,
like, I don't know, man. I have Twitter and Facebook, and I'm just telling you, the cognitive capability of these people seems limited in some important fashion.
mm.
And what are we going to do about that? Because, you know, I saw the Gavin
Yeah.
Ortland talk that Peugeot did, and I mean, I actually feel bad for Gavin because he clearly, like, I didn't just do that. No, no, you actually did just do that. He wasn't making it up. Like Jonathan
Mhm.
wasn't telling you a lie about what you just did and saying, I didn't do that over and over again
Mhm.
about the same thing that you definitely just did does not
Right, you
make
can
it
kind
go
of
away, my
see the
friend.
glitch happening in real time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if there is, you know, and this is a serious consideration that I think people are missing. What if he can never be made to see that glitch? How do we keep him off the internet spewing glitch, right?
Mm,
And give him a place where he is comfortable and feels fulfilled or something or content.
right.
That's the question. See, that's the thing that I want people to address because I think everyone's hiding the elephant in the room. The elephant in the
Yeah.
room is hierarchy was there for a reason. And one of the very important reasons is that there are certain people that just can't engage with certain things. And if they're exposed to them, they will bring everything down with them. Like
Mhm,
that's what that
mhm.
flood of art I was talking about. It's a flood in writing that happened very clearly in writing, and people are talking about it. There's a channel called Second Story. I don't I go back and forth with Second Story because
Mm.
maximum level of enchantment. Also, she's wrong about a
Yeah.
bunch of things, but also she's right about a bunch of things. It's a very interesting channel.
Mm.
So she's got some of this right, particularly her sci-fi fantasy stuff when she talks about the
Yeah.
rise of that genre. It's a created genre. It's an orchestrated mechanical genre of fiction. She's dead on most of that stuff. But so they're noticing it. Heather Pollington noticed it, right? Jonathan Peugeot noticed it in both writing and in art, right? And so a bunch of these disciplines are noticing this. But I would argue all of that, you know, read Language of Creation, my friends.
Mhm.
It's a wonderful book. You read it for lots of reasons. That's just a flood. You're just noticing floods in various compartments of the large ship
Mhm.
called
Yeah,
civilization,
floods.
right? And I'd
Yeah.
love to figure out like what do we do about this? We, you know, at the end of the day, look, I grew up on the internet. I was on the internet before there was a World Wide Web. I'm way embedded in the internet in ways
Good
most people
times,
don't
good times.
understand, right? Although I'm only on Discord normally now. I don't do
Mhm.
a lot of stuff anywhere else. But I used to be, you know, lurk in the IRCs and the news groups and the forums, and I don't do any of that anymore. Um, I would shut the internet off tomorrow, my friend. I would all of
Mhm.
my best friends I met on the internet. Shut it off tomorrow. Sorry,
Yeah, you
not worth
can.
it. Totally not worth it. Because now that everybody can participate, it's gone downhill. It's a downgrade.
Mhm.
It's not an upgrade. Everybody assumes that more participation, more people, you know, more ability for people to be equal is an upgrade, and it's definitely not an upgrade. It's a
Mhm.
downgrade. It's a flood. It's a flood.
Well, Mark, I'll give you my take. Here's my hot
Please.
take to do my best to answer your question about what to do with folks that have that binary way of thinking and approaching things. Um, I, I believe that the answer is to keep talking about what we're talking about now, and I believe that the truth wins. ultimately the truth will win. Like if I just give like a little, hey, spoiler, the way that this era ends is that truth wins.
Mm.
And that could be in the ultimate sense of like this, eschaton, you could say. But I mean, even in like our era or in people's lives, there's always the chance that they will turn around. And I really, whether it's in this hour or the 11th hour, we can always see the light. There's a proverb in the book of Proverbs that says, what does a poor person and a rich king have in common? They can both see the light at any
Mm.
point. And so I've seen this, and we've been doing this for about 10 years now since, Peterson and this whole
Yeah.
emergence of meaning and symbolism. And you look at the people that have been part of the discussion from then now, you know what? Like the Weinsteins, the brothers, they talk about things differently. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember Brett Weinstein being incredibly rigid. I mean, to the
Oh,
point
yeah.
where Jonathan laughed on stage because he just couldn't believe how binary he was with
Yep.
materialism.
Yep.
And so now he talks about things and he's a whole lot more generous, much more willing to talk about cognition and meaning and forming matter than he was 10 years ago.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
So if he can, then so can we, so can anybody. And I do the one thing that is to bring up the part that you did about the internet. The one thing that does concern me, I don't think it's going to alter what I just described. I really believe that at any point, any person, any era, truth will win. It always has that chance, and it ultimately will. But with the internet, the challenging thing now is that we're all on it, but we're not all in the same talking space. We're not in the same frame. Is that these algorithms have gotten so good? There's probably like 3 or 4 frames,
Yeah.
3 or 4 movies, 3 or 4 stories that filter what we see and kind of categorize us, do some
Yep.
segregation.
Mhm.
And we're not talking. We're not, it's very, the amount of that Venn diagram that overlaps is slowly going
Yep.
like this to where it becomes those echo chambers. It becomes like, well, we know what you are politically or religiously or in philosophy. And so we're just going to pair you with those people like within a few hours. And pretty soon that's the only thing that you see. And it's just going to be, you're not going to see the original clip of, say, like Peterson having that controversy on campus, right?
Right.
About pronouns and speech
That's right.
and students ripping the microphone cable out. It's going to be, your extreme liberal take that's doing a clip of a reclip of a reclip and telling you this is how I see it, and they're commenting while the video is being played.
Right.
Or it's going to be you're going to listen to, one of the conservative takes, and it's showing like
Right.
a Twitch clip of him doing a rewatch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
it's
It's a
become
copy of a copy.
yeah, and so it's become so segregated in that sense where it's like we're so captured or even politically captured to the
Right.
point where the internet isn't quite the swashbuckle that it used to be on the era that you're describing.
Yeah.
Um, so that there, I mean, that's I just look at that more of as a challenge, but definitely one that can be overcome, and we are seeing that. We are
Yeah.
seeing that.
I don't. Yeah, I don't agree with that view. I mean, one of the problems the internet was always super segregated like that. It's just that it was a filter first. So what would happen is even pre-internet on the bulletin board systems back in the day when you just had a modem and nobody knew what the internet was, um, the you needed a certain level of technical expertise, and that level of expertise and that level of economic mobility correlated with a certain type, not general intelligence. I don't believe in anything like IQ is a garbage number, um, but a certain type of intelligence. And so the
Mhm.
people that were able to get on, right, and that were engaging were, had certain things in common. And the things that when you found people that didn't, they built their own platforms. Like there are several old platforms in the internet that nobody even knows about anymore, like IRC and the new Usenet news groups. Those
Mhm.
two feed most of the content on the internet for everybody else, and they've been around the longest, or almost the longest. And so nobody knows about that. It's like the super underground, like, you know, the thing that makes 4chan work, or made 4chan work before it blew up, were those platforms, right? They were taking from those platforms, basically.
Interesting.
Yeah, and yeah, well, you gotta have been there, sir. It's like you wouldn't know that otherwise. You wouldn't have any access. There's a few people that came in late that knew that, but you know, it's very few indeed.
Right. It's kind of like that
So
generational or historical disconnection. You don't have
right,
the context. You just know the platforms that exist now and expect that to be the internet as ad infinitum.
it's a limit, you know. Like I broke that. I sort of broke that with recently with music. So I've been listening to Rick Beato and guys like that,
Oh yeah.
and Adam Reeder, and yeah, Professor Rock. I like him. Well, he frustrates me, but also he's correct, because he knows, as every wise and intelligent person knows, that Triumph is the most underrated rock band. That's definitely true. He's right about that. Other things I disagree with him on, but that he's definitely got that correct. And if you don't like Rush people, or you like to poke at the Rush people, you can tell them Triumph is Canada's greatest band. That really tweaks them off.
There's a hot take of the day.
Yeah, I have my fun, Derek. I have my fun. Yeah, but I think the problem is that even on those platforms where they're getting fed all the same thing, and to be fair, platforms act as filters first. A lot of those people don't end up agreeing, because ultimately, the more you talk about, the less you agree on, because there's so much stuff you can learn. The stuff I learned about, like, the music industry and how closed it is and is supposed to be, and how much better it was when it was 4 people making all the decisions for the entire industry, because that's when all the good music was there. It's like, well, that's weird. That pattern happened in the computer industry too. How strange. Oh, look, that pattern's in the business industry too. Oh, like, that pattern's everywhere. It's like, no. You actually just have 4 smart people.
Media and
or
film,
5.
especially. God.
Yeah.
The fragmentation of the channels. Now there's all the streaming platforms.
Right.
Ridiculous.
Right. And it spreads out. It's flooded. So the quality goes down, and the amount of stuff goes up, right? It goes across the horizontal. That's the flood that's in language creation, right? And so once you see that pattern, it's like, oh, so the more people you try to get together, say, get into the music business because they have some thing that might be good in music, the lower the music goes in quality. I think that's a 1-for-1 relationship. And then the question is what to do about it. And I still think the answer to that is hierarchy. And then the question is, how do we structure the hierarchy, and how do we keep it healthy? That's a big problem. Like, that's the sort of problem that we need to discuss. It's like, how do you
Now,
keep
it depends if we're going to be
hierarchy?
solving this immediately, or if we have a long-term approach. So I'll share an example. So, like, people talk, and here's a theory as it was told to me by a professor. So we talk about the Roman world, and we talk about Constantine and how the Roman Empire, right? You know, the highest peak of empirical order and law became a Christian empire. And the fact that they were the ones that, you know, it was a Roman judge that sentenced Christ to be crucified. And then all of a sudden, about 3 to 4 centuries later, what do you know? They're now a Christ-centered empire. How did that happen? Well, obviously it didn't happen right after the crucifixion or within that generation.
Sure.
It happened many generations. One of the reasons that it was described to me was that people were faithful to live out their lives according to the virtues and the principles of their faith, one of which was the dignity of every living human person. And so the Roman world did not share that. The pagan Roman world did not share that. And so whenever they gave birth to undesirable outcome of babies, so it could have been just female, you know, or it could have had some type of dysformant, or came out with some type of handicap, disability, you know, whatever. One of their practices is that they would go out to the edge of the city, and they would just leave it on these rocks as, you know, quote unquote sacrifices to whichever pagan god. But ultimately what they were doing, they were leaving it out there for the jackals, right? They're just leaving it out. They were killing them. And so they're discarding them, and they were just eliminating their life because they just valued them so low. And Christians would go out there, and they would compete with slave merchants for these little babies and these children. And so they would go out there, they would collect these discarded babies. One of the terms is like a garbage baby or a crap baby. That's just how low. I mean, they looked at it as like food for the wild animals and beasts. So Christians would bring them in, and they would adopt them, at a great cost to them, right? It was risky because if they were to be found out, potentially they could be incriminated, and who knows what the Romans would do to them. It was also financially a huge investment or a burden, because now you have a whole nother mouth to feed, and it's not even your kid. But they felt like, Christ, through living out the life and the faith of Christ, and that centralizing their decision and filtering what they prioritize and what they valued and what the sacrifices they're willing to make, they did it. So they started basically raising Roman children within their household, primarily females. And so generation after generation, what happens? You see that there's a whole lot more Roman men that grow up, and there's not a 1-to-1, 50-50 type of ratio. So you can start seeing what happened, and like the pattern starts emerging, and it starts snowballing every generation as Roman men start coming to Christian households for their wives.
That's right.
And what do you know? So then the wives marry, but they don't convert to pagan Romanism. No, they keep their Christian faith. Who's the one that raises the kids? Who's the one that educates the kids? It's the mom, the Christian mom. So you see, not immediately, not with all of them, but you do see this curve start to grow where people are talking about, people that are raised with these Christian women, more and more start becoming Christian. And then ultimately this starts scaling up the social hierarchy, not all at once, generations, hundreds of years, till it ultimately leads to St. Helen and St. Constantine. And that generation where now the emperor has a Christian mom and now is converting to Christianity. And so you see that and I present that as an example of, if it happened then, it can happen now, right? If it happened then, it could totally happen now. And it could be the scale of a life where, I mean, like, here's a more personal example that's not at the scale of an emperor or an empire over 400 years. But like my friend Steve, we had the chance to meet, who was a part of the group discussion that'll be published soon on my channel. Steve and I traveled 12 years ago through Latin America on bicycle. And at the time, we were like way off the charts in openness and exploring every religion and meditation, from Buddhism to Vedanta to Hare Krishna to local paganism in Latin America. I mean, just indigenous spirituality, all of it, man. We were just open for all of it. We're exploring. And then he ultimately landed on Vedanta and was sworn in and was very dedicated towards that. He wanted nothing to do with Christianity. His nickname by one of the pastors that took us in Guatemala was The Rock, La Piedra. And it was all in friendship, and we laughed and stuff. But he's like, The Rock, he's so stubborn. He doesn't want to hear all this. He doesn't want to convert. And so over time, actually through a series of tragedies in his life, he gave Christ a shot. And one of the most least likely of and reluctant converts 12 years later is now a catechumen about to join the church. And I tell you what, Mark, like if you had asked me 10 years ago, like, do you think Steve's going to be Christian? I'm like, likely no, but I still prayed for him. I still wrote him letters. I still kept, calling him a couple of times a year. He came out to visit several times, and, wasn't pushy, wasn't like, like there wasn't this urgency, like I've got to convert him now. Right.
Sure.
It was just like love, friendship, letters, speech, gentleness, kindness, hospitality, and then a lot of other factors. Now you look at his life today, and it is so filled. He's just brimming with hope. He's seeing the world in a whole new eyes of beauty. And anytime you bring up anything, he just sees how Christ is in the center of it. It's just amazing. And so at least, obviously, you're catching me at a very hopeful time, because I'm like, if it could happen in Steve's life, it could happen in any of the people that we mentioned and more.
I agree. I'm not, and that's great. I think there's a couple of things though that I'm a little skeptical about. One
Yeah,
of them
no, hear it.
is, you know, a lot of people, and I don't know, like unfortunately I don't get to talk to Jonathan every day or anything, right? So I don't know, but a lot of people comment like, "Oh yeah, they're sure this next talk with Peterson is going to flip him or Vervaeke or whomever."
Hmm.
And I know that for sure, guys like Pastor Paul Vanderklay have had that attitude, like, "No, we're gonna straighten Vervaeke out on this thing, and it's going to be fine." And I was always like, "That's never going to happen." Well, first of all, you guys don't have the skills. I mean, you're great and all, but also this takes a special set of skills, and you're not seeing the world enough the way they're seeing the world to meet them where they're at, which is what you have to do sometimes, not all the time, but very often you have to meet people, where they're at with the language they're using, and not let them skate on, like Vervaeke in particular. He'll say oh yeah, emanation, right? And he'll flip right back into talking about emergence immediately, and he'll go on for 20 minutes about emergence every time. He does it reliably, like a clock, and no one notices this.
Yeah.
No one notices this, and I'm like, oh guys, you got to stop him from doing that, because you're starting from emanation and he's starting from emergence. And so even if you get him to a good definition of emanation, it's not going to work because he's starting from emergence. You can't start the world from emergence. I don't know if you know this, Derek, but actually the world was here first before the things emerged. That's how they emerged. And so you have to start from emanation, right? It's not a magical trick. It's just a logical certainty based on the fact that things happen in an order.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's how order appears, right? Like also, which is different use of the
There's
term.
the heavens and the earth,
Yeah.
or then the earth.
So until you understand that they're creation deniers, they're denying a pre-created order, you're never gonna talk them into anything, because you're not actually talking about the same concepts at all. You're just using the same words. And so I'll extend that out a bit. The reason why doing that publicly looks like it works is because if it's done publicly, enough people who do understand the concepts will say differently from Vervaeke, but aren't quite, at the point that maybe Jonathan Peugeot is at, will see the point, and they'll get drawn into the symbolic world eventually, and
Yep.
and
At
upward,
any
hopefully.
point, any and all of us could see the light, right? And
Yeah,
advance to that next stage, or take that baby step, or make a big jump too.
right. But
Right.
I think the
Usually
problem
incremental.
is, how many people is that, and how many people go the other way? That's where I have a real problem, because it's way easier to tell a story about my interaction with this one person and their conversion, and it's way harder to tell a story. And I don't, I don't think this is a problem to be solved, right? It's way harder to tell a story about a mass conversion,
Right.
And
Well,
a
that begs the
mass,
question too, back to my example with
sure,
converting the Roman Empire through adopting discarded babies.
yeah,
Are we willing to do that work that would see the fruit at a larger scale 400 years later? Are we willing to
right,
do that work today?
right.
And
Well,
it's kind of like, man, did you watch the Andor series? Sorry.
yeah,
See, I bring it
yeah,
back to sci-fi. Can't help
yeah,
myself. Okay, well, one of the monologues where it's just like, I'm working to basically see a sunrise that I'll never see with my own eyes.
that's right.
And it's like, some of that work we do get to see sunrises. Other stuff that we're doing, we won't get to. We won't get to see those. Within our lifetime.
You plant a tree in whose shade you'll never enjoy. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the problem with that is that too often it strays into the evangelical sort of, here's how you do it. The Billy Graham, not to throw shade on Billy Graham at all, but also like that, what that leads to reliably, from what I have seen, because we've had that all along. Like, this is what people, Billy Graham was a thing. Like, he existed.
Oh, yeah.
I remember him, right? Like, that led us here. That evangelicalism is the thing that led us here. It's very hard to see, because you have to go all the way back to the First Great Awakening, which is pre-Revolutionary War, to see it in the US. But you can see it more clearly in Europe. That fracturing is how we got here. The unfracturing isn't more of the thing that fractures us. and I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree on any of the grounds. I'm saying that what we've been doing is more evangelization and not more finding ways to bind the world through our silent actions that no one will ever notice.
So instead of like adopting the discarded babies, we're out there trying to preach.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one thing, and it's not all preaching, and it's not all, and this is the over indexing or overvaluing of propositions and knowledge is a way to change people's minds, which in my experience is not a very good one. And I consider myself to be very good at it at the same time. And I'm just telling you, it's a bear. You have to do it one-on-one for it to be super effective. It can be super effective one-on-one. You also have to be really good at it. It takes years and years and years of practice to do that. And it's one person at a time. And man, at any time, if you lose them, because we lose people all the time, they're gone, and they're probably not coming back. Now, whether or not that impact will, resonate through time, and then the right circumstances will hit, and then suddenly they'll understand the message you were trying to give them. We can always hope, right? And that's all. But that's all we can do, and we have to move on. The bigger question is, what do we do from a societal level to set up the systems that enable what you're talking about to happen, so that what's really happening is you're taking the incorrectly discarded parts of the system, and you're reintroducing them into the hierarchy, or revivifying the hierarchy through that, right? By putting your, I have a formula called time, energy, and attention, right, into the right place with the proper orientation to make that happen. That's the question. And so that would be the difference between, let's suppose I talked to some person, he's in his 60s, and I convince him that he needs to start going to church again, and he does it, right? And that's wonderful. And then he dies alone because he was unmarried and whatever. That's fine. That's great. Just fit more, please, right? Or you talk some 20-year-old, not even into wanting to have a family, but into the skills to find the right woman to have a family with, and then they have a family. Oh, that's you know what I mean? Like, oh, that's a different thing. It also takes a different set of arguments. And you're talking about a bunch of different things, right? Because the old guy doesn't care about finding a family anymore. He's like, yeah, well, we're all done with that, and we're gonna move on, right? But the young kid, that is still a motivator. Or talking to somebody who's nihilistic into even wanting to have a family, right? Like these are bigger deals. From my perspective.
Makes you think of the story that Father Josiah Trenum shared at the summit. Where he talks about his dad.
Yeah.
Basically like seeing the light on his deathbed, like finally, converting and doing that whole thing right at the last hour, beyond the 11th hour.
Yeah. Years of opening the windows. Right? Yeah. Years of opening the windows and keeping the windows open and washing the windows and making sure that light's able to get through fully. Right. And then maybe at the end it works. It's fantastic. But in the meantime, we have to prevent people from closing the windows or, putting mud on them right. And that's the problem for me is what do we do about the meantime when there's so many forces, we'll say, fighting against people seeing the light? Like, what do we do about that? My argument is still, well, if you have a deep enough hierarchy, then those people, they're in a place in the hierarchy where they're not able to do as much damage, right? And so a spiteful person who's vengeful, you do not want them running your company, right? Because not only will they purge a bunch of people within your company, but eventually they'll pick a fight with the wrong CEO and they'll destroy both companies, because I've seen that happen. So you don't want those people running your company. I don't care how good they are at being a CEO, because many of them are actually quite good at being CEOs for reasons that have to do with the skills that you get by constantly enacting vengeance upon people that you don't like, right? For whatever reason.
Would you say deplatforming certain people that are like clouding up the windows would be the way to go?
Dude, I'm so for all kinds of censorship. You have no idea. Everyone's like, oh, no censorship. I'm like, are you nuts? That's how we got here. We need way more censorship, because people are like, oh, you can't burn books. And I'm like, did you read Plato? Because Plato is pretty clear about forbidden knowledge. And forbidden knowledge is an important factor that no one's taking into account at all. And I do mean no one. It's an ironic sort of thing, right? Where people just think like more information is better or more knowledge is better. And the ancients knew that wasn't the case. They have whole proofs. They've written whole books. I mean, part of the driving force of Plato's Republic, a lot of people don't seem to know this, is forbidden knowledge. Like the argument for the city and how to organize the city in a hierarchy is forbidden knowledge. He makes that argument in several ways, but like he anchors it in, well, we have children, don't we? Like that's pretty much the anchor of his argument. And then we come along, and this is why I don't like to read great books, people, or whatever. We come along, and somehow, if you go on the internet, unless you go to my channel and actually go to the thing that you can verify with the little numbers in the book, because I did all the research and like put it in the video, Plato's Cave has nothing to do with individuals breaking free from the education system or people lying to them. Quite the opposite, in fact. In fact, the other day, it was Ryan Reeves, which now I'm pissed because he's got a PhD. He should know better. He was like, several people break out of Plato's Cave. And I'm like, you didn't read the book. Sorry, you didn't read the book. No one can do that. It's a thought experiment about what would happen if you tried and how bad it would be for the person you did that to, because you have to do it to them. They can't do it for themselves. Like Plato's abundantly clear about this. I've got the receipts in my video on Plato's Cave, by the way. So now we're living in a world where people think that's what Plato said. When Plato said nothing like that, in fact, what Plato said conflicts with that very concept. Like, no, there's certain people that just shouldn't be exposed to certain things. This should be completely obvious to us. Like, again, I don't want, people who don't understand how computers work to vibe code the apps that run my TV, because I actually just want to watch TV sometimes. And I can't do that because these morons were allowed to touch something that requires some base level of intelligence and understanding of certain very difficult concepts, right? And they don't have it. And somebody paid them $200,000 a year to break my TV. Now I'm angry. Forget about my phone. Don't get me started on the phone, right? But it's the same problem. Like if you keep doing that, all the things you have in society will break. Like if you introduce ideologues, if you let them get administrative jobs at universities, you get what happened at UC Davis. Like you get what happened at Evergreen. That's what you get. That's because you wouldn't censor them. You wouldn't say, you know what? You're a great person. You have wonderful skills, and you're never going to run a university. You're never going to administer a university. You're never going to be in the administration of a university ever. Maybe you can administer something else. Maybe you make a great post office guy. I don't know, man. There's probably plenty of other jobs you can do, but you are never to be around a university for that reason. Like, no, you have a deficit. I'm not interested in trying to fix your deficit because I don't think most deficits can be fixed. We're just going to exclude you from this thing. Absolutely, you have to do that. This is what destroyed the software industry. I was there. I watched it destroyed that way.
It's like, to what extent? It's like, where do we stop with the censorship?
But that's always the problem. Yeah. That's always the problem. We don't have a healthy definition of tyranny. I mean, my definition is it's basically control that's unmediated, right? Yeah. And tyranny is when the person in control prefers their system over any alternative, right? And so, in other words, they're imposing, we'll say, their pure will or something like that on everything else. And I think we've just been caught in this idea that the solution to that ever happening, which, it's going to happen, like historically, like, hello, just read the Old Testament, right? It's not that hard. Is not everybody gets to do anything all the time, no matter what. Anybody can write a book. Anybody can publish a book. Anybody, like, these are not good things, right? I mean, part of what I was pointing out earlier is, guys like Tyndale translate the Bible into English, and then they compress a bunch of concepts into these very flat worlds. And then the next thing you know, a community, which is just a group of people, is the same as church. And I'm like, but that doesn't work. We know that doesn't work, but we've been living in that for hundreds of years. It doesn't work. Like, this is a
good way of saying that is a translation before interpretation.
Yeah, well, but the funny part is, and this is where I think people are confused, that a lot of people interpret it correctly. It's just that when the people that don't interpret it correctly, for whatever reason, are then forced up the hierarchy, right? And no one notices, yeah, but you actually don't understand the concepts required to be at this level of the hierarchy. Then you get tyranny. Absolutely. I mean, it's not the only way you get tyranny, but that will cause a tyranny. And then these administrators of these schools will do the things they did at Evergreen and UC Davis and so many other schools where they're not principled, probably because, to be fair to them, I don't think they're capable of being principled. I don't think they have the skills required to understand what principle is and then enact it. And then you end up with horrible violence because there's no mediating factor, or the mediating factor has been corrupted. And so there's no one there to stop the violent people, because there's always going to be violent people.
Well, so an example to your point, if you look at the universities, and I can say at least in the time, several years that I studied at University of California, Davis, they say that 97% of the faculty are voting Democrats, or, and a percentage of that are very far left in their progressivism. So at that point, that is like a takeover. That is like a deplatforming. And it could be a natural thing. Like I think of, coming from more of a conservative way of approaching things. If I wanted to teach at university, do I want to teach around a whole bunch of other neo-Marxists and postmodernists and spend my day around that community? No. But at the other hand, it's like, could it have been more so that they just nudged people out to the point where it's just people like them that are around them, and they're so good at it and so well supported that's the outcome that we have today. It's 97%. But then the other thing I wanted to say too is, like, it kind of depends again on that time. Where do we want to act now? Right. And then that kind of looks more of like the tyrannical, like, elimination of the opposition by any means necessary, which is happening every day. Like, it's just crazy how that's the default so many people are going to on all sides. But then the other approach would be more so of like the wheat and the tares. It's like, you know what? Let's not go out there and just hand pick all of the tares, all the weeds out of the wheat field. It's like, let's let it grow. And as they mature, they will reveal to us which ones are the wheat worth harvesting and which ones are worth burning.
If we're willing to burn anything, that gets back to the tyranny problem.
Yeah. Like, well, in that parable, it's not up to, it's the eschaton. Like, it's not up to us to be doing the burning.
Yeah. But then we're passive, and that's
not passive in the sense. I would make it more of a case for faithfulness of, like, live a life according to virtue within the things that are within your control, personal responsibility. That's a default, right? Like,
sure.
But we ultimately, there's no guarantee that we could be that primary influence to change people's lives, or even like the example I used earlier with Steve. Like, there's no guarantee that I could have been the perfect Billy Graham evangelist, and Steve could have still said, "Nah, Vedanta, sorry." Sure. So, like, a lot of this stuff is like the results are out of our hands. And so
absolutely,
if we're faithful to telling really good stories, living lives of virtue, doing the work, and then just leaving the outcome, it's kind of like the flow state that Vervaeke talks about.
It is.
Set intentions, do the work, and then let go of the outcome and just focus on the flow state of doing it.
It's the same. I mean, I think I'd add two caveats to that. Like, one is, but you have to do it in a way that people see it, because you have to be a good example, right? You need exemplars of the good. Mm-hmm. But the other thing I want to say is, like, it's not required that you fall into the binary and say, oh, we're just going to, like, go after all these people. Like, the thing that one of the tricks that Peterson does, I just did a video about Peterson yesterday on his 48 Rules for Life, actually, the original Quora post. He says, like, focus local first. And it's like, if you're if you're a Democrat, right, if you have leftist tendencies, then the highest place you should rise to is serving community, right? Like, being an existing community and going door to door with pamphlets. That's fine. But we just can't let you make political decisions. I see no problem with this. In fact, that's the way things used to work. And not too long ago either. Like, I'm not talking about like 200 years ago, right? No, that was very recent that's the way things work. community organizers would go and organize communities, and they wouldn't become president, and that was fine. When they become president, maybe that's not fine. Maybe bad things happen, and maybe it's partly because of the exemplification of,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, look, I'm a quote successful community organizer, and I just kind of scale up my community organization, which doesn't work, by the way, because you can't just do one thing in the same way at scale. Maybe sometimes you can, but I kind of doubt it, right? And therefore it's all good. It's like, but there was no good outcome. Like, I don't understand, right? And so that's what I mean. Like, people have a place, but when you kind of tell them they can do whatever they want, and then they get these fanciful ideas in their head, through whatever mechanism, maybe it's Girardian mimicry, or maybe it's demons whispering in their ears. I don't care what what you want to use, or maybe it's just what they see on TV. That's fine. Also, it's demons whispering in your ears, but whatever. They try to do things that they can't do or that aren't good, and they don't know they're not good, right? There's a lot of ways you can do things that look good in the moment that really aren't good at all, right? That's super easy. People fall into that all the time. You give money to the guy on the street because he's homeless, and it just turns out he goes and spends it on heroin. It's like, well, that wasn't the right answer. Maybe buy him a sandwich next time. And if he refuses the sandwich, then maybe you learned a lesson, because that happens a lot, by the way, right? And then, maybe if you're working with the guy day to day, you can help him. But the only way we can do that is if you're not trying to run for an office that you're not going to do well at. Like, if you've got a politician who doesn't do well in their office, someone's running the show, though, right? Or maybe many people, and I don't know what's happening there, and it's hard, right? Because now you can't blame that person who won the seat. Okay, they're a bit of an idiot, but also someone's causing the bad things to happen, even if it's not them, we'll say directly. This is an impossible situation, because now we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and we don't know. Like, now you can't see the wheat for the tares.
And I would say that's important. Especially people that have duties in society, hey, that's your calling, that's your role. Some people are very good politicians, and they serve a community service,
Right.
But I'm also think there's another way of approaching it. I would say more eternally. And for example, with the Roman Empire instance that I said before, if you look at, not just those 400 years-ish of what it took from crucifying Christ to become a Christ-centered empire, Christianity has seen that empire come and go.
That's right.
Over hundreds of years. And they've seen many empires come and go.
Right.
There's going to be a day where there isn't the United States, as much as I love this country. And as much as I really like watching the World Cup being hosted in my country. Go USA. But there is going to be a day, hopefully many generations from now, where there just isn't going to be the USA as we know it today. And so investing in the treasure that's in, Christ, that's centering these, societies or empires, is where we start and end. So even the person that's a politician and doing their, service to society, they start and end with that eternal purpose, right? Of making sure that they live a Christ-centered life. So because the more people that live Christ-centered lives, the more we're going to see a Christ-centered country or society.
Right. Yeah, sure.
And really, like, I tend to believe that we end up with the leaders that we deserve, and that kind of like emerges up. They're like, it's like if you look at cultures in mushroom cultures, the majority of the organism is in the wood chips in the soil. It's like just we just see a few of the flowers of the mushrooms that we would harvest.
Sure.
And those are the leaders. So all of that mycelial activity, that's us living our day-to-day lives and what's important to us.
For sure.
I know there's some hijacking, but I also believe that your sins will find you out, and it's just a matter of time. That's one of the things that really I thought was profound in those early Peterson days, is him telling stories of him as a therapist, his clinical work. He's like, you guys, trust me, it just doesn't work. the long term it doesn't work. They come into me and their lives are falling apart.
No one gets away with anything, he used to say. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it might be within that season, or it might be at the end of their life, or maybe even after, like the ramifications are passed to their kids. Um, so I'm making a case again for that eternal timeline of like, hey, let's focus on things that have proven to be far outlasting any of these empires. As important as the social work is, or political or economic and all of that, that's part of our day-to-day lives.
Sure.
But it's also passing ultimately.
Oh yeah. No, I don't disagree with that necessarily. But the problem is when you switch the frame to eternal, it doesn't tell you anything about what to do in the here and now. Right. And then when you switch the frame to the here and now, it doesn't tell
Mark,
you
I look at that as kind of the thrilling part, right?
thrilling
Living a
part.
life by the spirit, so to speak, of like,
Yeah.
it's not like a to-do list every single day. It's more of like a map and a guide, right? Navigating patterns. It's like you're given enough to be able to live a life and have the freedom to, apply these things one situation at a time. And that's kind of the adventure in it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, a lot of it again boils down to, and this is always hard for me because Rene Girard is not a good guy at all, by the way. But he's also not wrong when he talks about mimicry. And he might be wrong when he talks about scapegoating, but I have to do some more research on that. That's a Tyndale word, it turns out. But the mimicry thing's super fantastically important, because I think the thing that we don't realize anymore, or you want lost wisdom or something. Oh, most of what we call learning, most of our behaviors are mimicked. They're not given to us through propositions.
Yeah,
and what
I'm
that
seeing that even
means,
with our 3-year-old and the training that we're doing right now. Like literally today, my wife and I were talking. I'm like, babe, so much of what she's learning isn't taught, it's caught.
it's caught.
Like, it's just like face to face, or just seeing movements, and it's like mimicking embodiment.
Yeah, they admit that's even animals do this. It's not like it's everywhere in their data. The scientists just poo-poo it.
It's always fun. One of the fulfilling things as a dad, like this is just happening with my son too. He's a little bit older. He's 5. And it's like that sense you have of like, your kid's like watching you, and that mimicking observation.
Yep.
It's the funnest thing. And so you're kind of like, okay, well, I need to make sure I'm like accurate and I'm doing the thing in the right way, and that I'm doing this with intention, because I can just sense he's just like downloading all of it, right? And pretty soon exactly what I'm doing, he'll be doing in a matter of moments.
Yeah, all the things we do. I was in the grocery store the other day to get a free bar cake, because they give out free cake to you on your birthday. That there was a tiny shopping cart. And like I've never seen it before in the store, but of course I don't look because I don't have kids and I don't do any shopping anymore, thank goodness. Tiny shopping cart, and there's this little kid pushing the tiny shopping cart next to his mom, and I'm just like, this is awesome. This is fantastic, right? Because we do mimic. But when you have a bunch of things like TV, or worse yet, the internet, I mean, God forfend, TikTok, the worst of the worst. What are we doing? Like, what are we allowing to be done? What are we allowing people to see that they will inevitably, irrespective of everything else you do or could do to them, they will eventually end up mimicking? Not everybody, but like 90% of the population. I'm sorry, we had the Tide Pod thing. People ate Tide Pods. Okay, people died eating Tide Pods. This is like, we should not have let that happen. I'm sorry, but I'll fight you. There's censorship. I believe those people should have been pulled off the internet, possibly thrown in prison for at least 30 days or something. And like, you can't do that.
Like literally like detergent pods? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. The Tide Pod challenge was real, and people died doing it. Like, this is not a good thing. It was a TikTok or Instagram or one of the stupid platforms. Like there's other things like that have happened and continue to happen that no one's doing anything about, right? And because to do something about it would mean to interfere with this mythical free speech thing, which is a lie. It's a psyop. There's no the whole concept's ridiculous, right? It was meant to talk about government speech in the context of the federal government, It wasn't meant to say you can say do whatever you want. These people, they read history.
Oh, yeah.
Did you read about the Puritans? Because the Puritans were still doing that garbage long after, right, or the remnants of the Puritans, I should say. Like in New England, they people still ran stocks, right? If you said the wrong thing in the town square, they'd put you in the stocks. Okay, and that was not considered a constitutional violation. I'm sorry, you just haven't read enough history, right? Like nobody ever operated this way. Nobody ever said you could say whatever you want, wherever you want, however you want, in any way that you want. No one ever said that. That's absurd, because then you get bad people faking, eating Tide Pods and then causing people to eat real Tide Pods because for whatever reason mimicry works, and then dying.
Right.
And I'm still a hard no on all of that. And
it's definitely in like the don't yell fire in a theater, right, or in a closed environment.
That was always the example, but like they framed it wrong. Like everybody's lying to you.
But now in our modern day, we have TikTok "Don't eat the Tide Pods" video.
Right. But everyone's lying to you about how it works, because we have two forms of government, right? The federal government, and what the federal government is not supposed to be universal for the states for the most part. There are some notable exceptions, but also that's not how it's supposed to work. There's a bunch of different rules under which the federal government operates, and then each state has different rules from one another and a different structure from the federal government for a very good reason. So, for example, the separation of church and state is a complete psyop. There's no such thing. That is not what you think it is. Maryland was supposed to be a Catholic nation, or state rather. Nation's the better word. Different idea, right? And then the federal government is not supposed to be able to do that, but the state governments are supposed to be able to pick state religions. They absolutely are, and in fact, they used to. We've done away with that. Well, wow. There's nothing preventing anyone from doing this, except probably somebody will take it to the Supreme Court who has a lot of money to try to make it not happen, because that's how they got religion out of schools.
Let me ask you this:
separation of church and state.
If there was a state that went forward with that and instituted a, I think we're frozen. Sorry, I froze for just a second there. I don't know if I kept going, but let me ask you this: if there was a state of all of the 50 states, which one do you think would move forward and institute a state religion?
I don't think you could get away with that at all. What I would say is the state that would have the most luck would be South Carolina, where I live, I think, because that was the beginning of the Civil War, and they're very much like, screw you guys, although I'd say they're a little too conformist. So yeah, I mean, we shut down for 90 days in fake news virus scamdemic. Only 90 days, which is a plus, but also we did shut down for 90 days, and that was ridiculous. Like, I was surprised that some states didn't shut down at all, like South Dakota, right? So we're on the better end of that curve. We're probably in the top 5, but also
top 5. Yeah. I would say like Texas would be top 5, and I would think maybe one of the like sub 1 million population states, like Wyoming, could also try to pull it up, or the Dakotas.
The problem is you don't have the that Southern Baptist spirit. Like
right. So definitely Bible Belt.
That's what I'm saying. Is you need a very cohesive. Like, there's a lot of people of this one denomination.
Yeah.
And then I think you could get it going. That's why I don't think it's possible anymore. But yeah, in theory, I agree with you. The lower population states have a better chance, at least on paper. But I think the problem is they have too many denominations. That would be the problem down here. I think there's just too many denominations.
Oh, well, yeah, that kind of surfaces some other issues too, being fractured. That's that kind of brings it back to like the invisible church that we talked about way back in the beginning of. It's like, okay, well, yeah, we're all one church, spread across a rainbow banner, with, I don't know, fuzzies. Until it's like, okay, well, we need to make a decision like this. It's a hard and fast decision. And now it's like, well, I want to be in charge, and there's no way you can be in charge. I'm not for it if they are.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the problem. And that was all caused by the collapse, because unbeknownst to most people, apparently Guys like Luther and Calvin, they did not want to quite get rid of the Pope. That wasn't their goal. Their goal was to replace the Pope with the king. So they wanted all the papal authority. They just wanted to move it explicitly. Like that's what they wanted. And that isn't what happened. I understand that. Although in some cases, like England, it did happen that way. But also, they're not the heroes you think they are, saving you from tyranny. They're just moving the tyranny and consolidating power in the political.
Yeah. You ever, especially with all of the warring or competitive factions in Europe at the time, all these princes and dukes and
that seems to be what it was. Like that seems to be what it was, because it turns out, like, you know, in some sense, when Luther nailed the theses to the wall, he did nothing wrong because they were in Latin and no one could freaking read them. So that wasn't the issue. The issue was some little snake. I gotta hunt this down. Somebody knows, or I'll go do all the damn research myself. I'll fly over to Europe just to do this research. Some snake translated those things to German and then printed them and then sent them out to everybody. That's what causes the problem. Everything else is fine. Until that happens, everything's fine. And after that, if that hadn't happened, Luther probably would have been fine and stayed in the Catholic Church forever. And it wouldn't have been an issue, honestly. But it was the release of these things in German that caused, and Luther didn't do that. So that's not entirely his fault.
Have you read Dominion, Holland's book?
No, I haven't read that yet. No.
So there's a chapter, and the way that he describes the dynamic that you're describing is like Luther was just the one lit match that was dropped in a room full of matches. And then people like you're describing and all of these princes and geopolitics and all of the other tensions, it was the release and it just lit them all on fire. And by the time it was lit, it was irreversible.
Yeah. And I think it's a better frame to think about this as a shift in power, which explains why we are so, especially in the United States, so keen on the government fixing moral problems. I'm like, the government is not going to, like, especially in the United States, like they're actually supposed to, like at the federal level in particular, they're supposed to stay out of that stuff. The state level, that's a different story. But at the federal level, the federal government's not supposed to be prescribing these things because the states are supposed to have their own churches. Like,
well, Mark, I'm glad you brought this up because I usually don't talk about politics stuff unless it's usually through like a story or symbolism type lens. But I will say that I am not in agreement. I don't believe that the true openness of religion and the state not choosing a religion is a good. I think it's really critical, and I see that there is a potential for more fruit if the state will choose a designated religion. So that way we can have things like the 10 Commandments up and it's not a big deal. That we can have some type of axis of which to refer, higher power to refer to. Because this whole thing, we basically created the monster of secularism.
That's right.
By just leaving this vacuum, right? And
I agree.
So I like how it's like, okay, not at the federal level, leave it up to the states, and they're local enough. Although states like California are so freaking gigantic, they might as well be their own country. So it's
three states,
it's a little,
maybe 5.
A little bit in the gray area there. But if you look at, just I don't know, median-sized state population, all that, it's local enough to where you could have some type of consistency of values and culture. I think that makes a whole lot more sense. And it's not to say that it's like this religion and nobody else. Obviously, we could say like, this is the primary one and we're friendly to all. But like, listen, if we're going to do these other things, like this is our go-to, this is our reference point. And just say, like, call a spade,
That might seem like a temporary upgrade, Derek, but history might show why that doesn't work quite as well as you think. You should, if you haven't read American Nations by Colin Woodard, you got to read that because that actually resolves some of that. I mean, not
say it again. What were you referring to?
American Nations is the name of the book, Colin Woodard. But that it resolves some of that in a secular fashion, not correctly. I'm not saying he's right. I'm saying when you rename or revivify the term nation, and you realize that the United States is not a nation or a country, but actually there are many nations within the United States, and then you divide the map correctly, because states like Virginia, and I love Virginia, Virginia's awesome, contain places like Appalachia, which actually should be its own state because all those people are the same, right? So you'd have to redraw the map, right? But if you did that, actually, you could go a long way towards secularization, because what would happen is the cultural values are the same enough because it's a nation, and I think the religion would take care of itself in that case. Although I'm not sure that would work. It would just work better than any other proposal I've seen in my head, which isn't saying too much, but it's saying something, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
And there are some just natural, what'd you call it? Like diaspora, or like Wisconsin, for example. Many Catholics moved to Wisconsin, right? And so there's so there's Catholic churches, it's one of the reasons why football. It's one of the reasons why Vince Lombardi took the head coach of the Packers job, is because there's enough Catholic churches in the football area, because he went to mass every day. There was even times where he took the whole Packers team to mass in the morning before the game.
That's hysterical. I want to read this real quick.
And whenever they, I did see there's some really good comments. I'll just say one more thing on that. Whenever they traveled, the 1960s Packers team, Vince Lombardi as the head coach, they would book their base camp or their hotels in a city that was named after a saint or some type of Christian name.
Oh, really?
So like if they went to California, for example, they would say in like Santa Barbara. Right. Not Riverside or whatever, No offense to Riverside, but
well, yeah, Ethan, Dominion is just an attempt to help liberals cope with historical significance of Christianity. I can confirm. I also like this comment from David here. That means living life and living it in community and hierarchy. Yeah. See, it's the hierarchy part no one's discussing. This sort of has me annoyed. Arandu went to start over from the beginning. He says this all the time. It's not going to happen. This is why it's recorded, man. But I do appreciate the comments. I find that amusing. Well, and I think that it actually is to the point, right? Like, part of the reason why we're so selfish is because we can have our own church, right? Like, this is the great problem post-Reformation, is anybody can start a church. There's a big clip going around. It was going around yesterday, I think, at least on Twitter, where this guy basically said, well, you can start your church and do whatever you want. No one can tell you what not to do. Like, he starts to kind of outline that and then stops himself in the middle, and everyone's like, see.
Yeah, I've definitely heard many of those just in day-to-day interactions. I mean, I haven't had one of the pivot points in my life, kind of speaking in like the faith sphere, is that someone basically handed me one of it's not even named a church, it was named a fellowship. They handed me basically the bylaws or the forming documents of the group, and said, well, why don't you take a look at these and redo them, update them to the way that we like to do them now. And it completely overwhelmed me. And I was just like, man, I'm just excited about the Christian life and, living a life in the Spirit. And I have no training. I have no formal education in this. I'm just running off of excitement levels, I'm definitely not the one to do it. But the fact that they were turning it over to me scared me. I was like, well, yeah. And then the other example is that someone else said, well, you should just go over to this place. A couple churches moved from this area of town, and it's kind of created a vacuum, right? They need some type of, and so why don't you just go start a prayer group? And then that leads into a small church, and that leads into, a bigger church, and you could just be the guy. And so I went from rewriting bylaws to being a church planter. And I was like, that terrifies me too. And there's something that seems it brought up a whole lot of more very foundational questions, led some of the impetus of why I was, very much pushed me towards inquiring into things like orthodoxy. Where I was okay, there's some type of tradition, there's some type of centralizing foundational substance here that is beyond just people like me, right? It's beyond just the characters, beyond just the current leadership, that we can all that can bond us together.
It was here before you, and therefore it's bigger than you, and therefore there's a place for you in it. And that's not universally true, but it should be true with the Orthodox Church for sure. And I would assume with the Catholic Church, they pretty much have places for everybody, both of them, right? Or pretty much everybody. And that's kind of the purpose, right? And it's like for you to think that you can just sort of like start from scratch and do that on your own by yourself, even at the community level for a bunch of people you've never met, or even people you know but know casually, that's so absurd to me that I can't, like, I know I fully believe you, Derek. Also, my brain will not allow me to believe anything like that could ever happen. Like, at the same time, I'm just caught in this conundrum because it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrifying to believe anybody would just be like, you know what, you're a pretty likable guy. You should start a church. Like, what? like what are you talking about? But we've entered that with so many things. Like, oh, you seem like a good bartender. I bet you could be, in Congress in no time, right? Or you seem like you have pretty good ideas. I bet you could code a pretty mean app for a phone that crashes.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is the problem.
Break away and start your own thing.
Break away. Yeah. Why not? Well, I mean, you have some skills and they're valuable, and you should probably deploy. Right? It's like, yeah, but most of these things require more than one set of skills. Like
normal in the commerce sphere, it's like, but then you take that over to like the eternal sphere, or like
right
church. Shouldn't transfer over. Something shouldn't transfer over. Should be distinct.
It doesn't. Well, and the difference is the difference between emanation and emergence, right? And I was when I did my live stream with Neil deGrade, we were talking about this. I said, the fundamental difference is that emergence can only give you a unity, okay? But a unity does not have the quality of a whole, right? A unity is just the sum of the parts, right? Where a whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And the whole only comes from emanation. That's it. It doesn't come from anything.
Yeah, and it's the shape of which would be triangular, or triadic.
Exactly.
Right, because you have 2 points, but then those 2 points are only together because of that unifying point above it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it creates a whole new shape. So, Mark, it's time to land the plane here with our talk.
It is. I agree.
We have USA men's national soccer team playing in like 40 minutes, and I need to head over to my uncle's house to go watch the game.
Excellent. Well, this went way longer than I thought, but I'm simply delighted.
Pleasantly
this is wonderful.
This is good.
Wonderful conversation. Yeah, and I'm happy to do more if we can both find some time and the audience approves, which means you have to comment and like the video. But however you want to land your end, Derek, and then I'll take us out.
Yeah. Well, I just appreciated that you reached out and that we made it happen. It went places I wasn't expecting, and
me too.
I'm really glad that we're able to, explore some of these topics together. But some of the things that you said challenged me and got me thinking of another way. So for that, I'm very grateful. And I hope it was super helpful for the folks that are going to be listening.
Wow. I mean, I would say mission accomplished, but mission objectives exceeded on both sides. Yeah, you gave me a new frame, which is very helpful. I'm going to have to noodle over that and a couple of other things that I have to think through myself. So yeah, this went way better than I thought. And I really appreciate the time and not just the time. I mean, the care that you took towards myself, my audience, and the topics, because that is often missing in these sorts of discussions. Hopefully not on my channel, but I see it a lot. Right. And so I really want to just take a moment to appreciate that, because it makes a difference. I mean, this is how this is the sort of conversation that makes a difference in the world, as opposed to Gavin Ortland and Jonathan Peugeot duking it out in a clumsy fashion because his interlocutor could do no other. So I really appreciate it. And we should try to arrange something else in the future if we can manage it. And look, everybody, the sort of motto over here is for everybody to be better because the world needs you. How do you make the world better? All you have to do is make yourself better. So take care of yourselves and each other.